We've got some really remarkable news here. Republican members of Congress are now facing widespread backlash across the U.S. as their constituents are flooding town halls. These constituents are pushing back against Trump and Elon's efforts to use DOGE to do things like fire nonpartisan civil servants and cut Americans' health care and earn benefits. Here's just a sampling of the kind of reception that Republican politicians are receiving nationwide.
You can go and yell all you want, but I can't understand 10 people, let alone 100 people at once.
They said your budget, not the president. And you are doing us a disservice to set that down and not stand up for us. And
A lot of this stuff will be litigated. Be litigating court. You don't think I'm going to stand up for you? Stand up. So if we're going to have a town hall, and I'm going to come and stand in front of you and take your questions and try to answer them as honestly as I can, then let's do that, okay? But if you're going to just yell at me, that's not going to be an effective town hall.
I'm a registered Republican voter and retired active Army officer. How can you tell me that DOGE, with some college whiz kids from a computer terminal in Washington, D.C., without even getting out into the field, after about a week or maybe two, has determined that it's okay to cut veterans' benefits?
I think a couple things. Let me give you an example. Did you know that the VA was in charge of payments for illegals for housing? Basically, the VA.
No, I'd like for you to send me. Could you send me that reference so I could research that? Because no, I'm not aware of that. And I would tell you that that's a red herring, a false flag. If you're throwing that kind of political stuff up, trying to cut veterans' benefits, that's very alarming to me.
When will you stand up to them and say that is enough?
The end result of the fraud and abuse that has been discovered already.
Absolutely no proof.
But what is going on right now today is the House of Representatives and the Senate are totally abdicating their responsibility to protect on the executive. You stand here and say, I'm not sure about that, or I'm not sure about that. You put up, frankly, some of these slides are very misleading. Let's talk about the Trump tax cut. How much of that deficit in that jump from 22 up was the tax cuts to the incredibly rich people of the world who are now in our White House and dismantling our government? You are an attorney. You are an officer of the court, in addition to swearing an oath to our Constitution. And yet, well, you and so many of your colleagues are just sitting around watching. Well, I don't know. We'll see what happens next month. Oh, those workers have rights. And yes, they've been violated. So now they're getting processed. Our courts can't handle this. These people have planned this for years, and they are doing it. It is a fire hose of action, illegal actions that even you acknowledge right here. But we'll just worry and let the courts sort it out. There won't be a country left to run, sir, if you guys just sit back and are afraid of a primary.
I think it's fair to say that Trump and Republicans did not factor this level of outrage and backlash in their Project 2025 plans. But let's just take a step back here and remember what they've been trying to do during the past month. It's been a deliberate strategy to blitzkrieg the entire federal government with as much extreme and destabilizing policy as possible. Now, part of this, of course, is just to flat out hurt people because it'll inure to the benefit of Trump's donor class. But there's another part of the strategy that's about power. Not actual power, but the perception of power. It is designed to make us numb to his actions and so that we'll just give in. It's a strategy to overwhelm the media and the opposition with rapid-fire actions, all to create the illusion of strength and control that is so overpowering it prevents Americans from having the will to even show up to town halls like these to hold our elected representatives accountable. It is authoritarianism 101. one. And the strategy is not even that much of a secret. Here's Steve Bannon outright admitting to it on camera.
So what we've got to do is just hit, and keep it. It's momentum. The opposition party is the media. And the media can only, because they're dumb and they're lazy, they can only focus on one thing at a time. And the one thing they'll mainly focus on is either they do the horse race, or once the horse race, who's in, who's out. Right. It's like the high school, who are the cool kids in the cafeteria, right? Because it's easy. It's the reason they do the horse race stuff all the time, right? And they won't do the basic, what are the core things that are going on in the country? I said, all we have to do is flood the zone. Every day we hit them with 3 things. They'll bite on one and we'll get all of our stuff done. Bang, bang, bang. These guys will never be able to recover. But we got to start with muzzle velocity. So it's got to start, it's got to hammer, it's got to muzzle velocity. You got it. When you get anything in life, remember the house is 5 to 7 against, right? To get something done, you've got to go through these certain stages of momentum and keep forcing it. And so otherwise, just pure inertia, right? Or the loss of energy.
That's the strategy. It is to overwhelm you and make you give up so that you don't notice a fundamental truth, that Donald Trump is much weaker than you would think. By constantly moving from one outrage to the next, Trump is trying to maintain the impression of power and control so that you just accept his role as a dictator, which is why we can't let ourselves be overwhelmed or fatigued, because the way that dictators have come to power in the past is by everyday people just giving up. But what's amazing about these town hall clips is that they show this strategy isn't working as well as Donald Trump and his lackeys had intended. Because at the end of the day, they are underestimating the American people and they're underestimating what democracy is capable of. I mean, just look at these protests that have happened in just the past week. And it's not just big angry crowds, it's actually something that's reflected in the data. When Donald Trump took office last month, it looked like his effort to project power was actually working. His approval rating reached around 50%. For the first time, he had net positive support in this country. But now, recent polls show it dropping precipitously. And multiple polls, including those from Reuters, Quinnipiac, CNN, and Gallup, all indicate that Americans disapprove rather than approve of Trump. Everything from January 6 pardons, banning trans people from the military, shutting down USAID, tariffs that will raise prices, and mass firings of civil servants are all deeply unpopular with the American public. And maybe most worrying for Trump, he's also receiving low approval ratings on even his most signature issue, the economy. Yeah, turns out that promising to lower prices on day one and then actually presiding over rising inflation isn't a great way to prove to voters that you know what you're doing. So look, if you take one thing from this video, let it be this. While we still have serious challenges ahead, and that much is clear, the fight is still worth it. Trump derives his power from the perception of total control, from the perception that he can quash all dissent. But when Americans show up at these town halls like they're doing right now, it instantly destroys that illusion. So let's stay engaged and do what past generations of Americans have done so well, and that is to beat the fascists. Before you go, just a quick note, if you'd like to see more of my content, which is always free of advertising, sponsorships, and paywalls, please make sure to subscribe to this channel using the subscribe button right here on the screen. And if you'd like to support my work even further, you can grab a copy of my instant #1 New York Times selling book, Shameless, available for sale right now. That link is also on the screen. Thanks so much for watching.